everyone, it's Brennan. Welcome to my channel and welcome to another video. Today I have my January wrap up. We have started the year out so strong. I read 16 books in January. We're definitely on track for my current Goodreads goal of 135, but I really think I can, if not hit 200, at least get really close to 200. I do have some more ambitious books on my TBR for February, so I probably won't hit that 16 mark again, but we'll see. I am just going to go, for the most part, in order that I read these books. I read a couple books that were in a series together, so I'll talk about those together. But I'm gonna start out with a DNF. It is very rare that I DNF books. Sometimes I can just tell that the book I'm currently reading is slowing me down for all the other books that I have planned. And this book is Lovely War by Julie Berry. There is nothing wrong with this book. It is simply that I was not in the mood for the topic and the genre, basically. I listened to about the first 30% of this audiobook. The audiobook was really good. So this is like historical fiction romance told from the viewpoint of Aphrodite and some other Greek gods, and it's like historical, I think it's World War I and World War II love stories. I was just simply not in the mood for it. Like I said, nothing wrong with it. It was a good book. It was just not the genre that I was feeling at the moment, and truly, it's just not a genre that I'm interested in reading right now. Okay, now let's start with the books that I read in January. The first book that I read for the new year was Rebel by Beverly Jenkins. I'm pretty sure I started and finished this audiobook on January 1st. This is an American historical romance. It is set a little bit after the Civil War, so the early 1870s or maybe the late 1860s. We are set in Louisiana and we are following a school teacher. So she has come from the New England area and it's like facilitated by the Catholic Church or something in Louisiana for her to teach. And a lot of her students are like adults who have just for the first time in their lives after the Civil War been given the opportunity to go to school, to learn things, to learn to read, things like that. And her love interest is this successful, I'm not really sure where his money comes from, but they are like a successful family in New Orleans. And they run into each other when there's some like rowdy Confederate, ex-Confederate soldier guys vandalizing her schoolhouse, and then they start to assault her, and our hero comes in and saves her, but then she also finds out that she's being evicted from the place she was staying, so she basically ends up being the companion to his mother. And it's their love story from there. These Beverly Jenkins books, the characters get together, they're happy, they're smart, capable, mature adults who just want to be together, and then the rest of the plot is just the action of their lives in the time period, and I love them. And I gave Rebel by Beverly Jenkins 5 stars. And then I read a nonfiction. I read American Kingpin by Nick Bilton. This is 100% a read from Caroline Johnson. I'll link her below. She read this. This is true crime. This is about the Silk Road, which was in the, was it 2011? I think it was 2011 that it started. So I mean, recently, it was 10 years ago. But the Silk Road was a black market dark web website where people could buy and sell illegal goods. And the story follows the very unlikely creator of the Silk Road. Albright is his last name. Ross Albright. And how he created it, things that went on as he was running it, and the outcome of it. But what was so interesting to me in particular was what different like federal agents and officers and the people who were on the case, their actions, because they were also not good. And it was just a really interesting story of like the different people who were involved around this, from the inside, from the outside, from the peripheries, and it was really interesting. I gave it 5 stars. It was a really great true crime experience. And then I read Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. I'm going to link below the recent video that I posted where I talked about this. It was in my, spoiler alert, favorite thrillers that I've read. And this is a thriller. It's got a little bit of a romantic aspect in it. Our main character is this 30-year-old. She's like a vice president executive of this cosmetics company. And when she was a teenager, she was an accessory in a murder. And the murder victim was her best friend. So now she's in her 30s and there were some new developments in the case, and now she is having to go to jail for 5 years. And we actually spend some time with her while she's in jail. Really, my favorite part of this was just seeing the dynamics of her jail time, prison time experience, and the relationships, friendly and just like conveniently, that she made. But then she gets out of jail, and then we have the rest of the book. Jail. I say jail. She was in prison, like federal prison. She is a felon. So she gets out of jail, and the person who actually murdered her best friend turned out to be a serial killer. He was also her boyfriend when she was a teenager. But then she gets out of jail, and some more murders start happening. So then we're following the detective who is looking for him, but then the detective was also a high school friend of our female main character. So there's like a little bit of romance there. And then we get the flashbacks of her when she was a teenager and what actually happened, and then just what exactly is going on in this town. Does that make sense? I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of the best thrillers that I have read in my existence. And then I listened to another true crime. I listened to I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. And this book is so popular. And Michelle McNamara died before it was published or released. This is about the Golden State Killer. And I will just say that as I was listening to this book, sometimes I would have like nightmares just from the descriptions of what this man did, and him like entering people's houses, and just the planning and the general creepiness of him. I like truly can't believe that this is real, and that's what unsettled me so much, was that this is a real man who is now in prison as like a 70-year-old guy, but he was just recently captured in like 2018, and these murders and assaults happened in the 70s and 80s. So it's just like really unsettling that this is a real thing that happened. But I gave this 5 stars. I mean, it was super interesting, very unsettling to me as the reader. And I'm glad this man is in prison now. And just the emotional aspect of what Michelle McNamara put into this story, to finding clues and evidence in this case herself and not letting it go cold. It is chilling. And like I said, it's a 5-star book from me. And then I read The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty. And I just really like how Leanne Moriarty's books are written. And when I say that, I mean I love the angst and tension and drama of a suburban thriller, especially in Australia for some reason. And her audiobooks are narrated by Australian narrators, and they are just so good. But this book starts out, we have a wife who accidentally stumbles upon this letter from her husband, and it says, "Don't open unless I'm dead." And he is not dead, but she has stumbled upon it. She eventually finds out what's in that letter, and then we snowball from there. We have 3 different women characters in here. We have the wife, we have an older woman who has lost a lot of people in her life, and then we have a woman who just recently found out that her husband and her best friend are in love with each other, and then she goes back to her hometown to live with her mom. And all these women are in the same town together, and all their stories are just wrapped around each other, and it is so good. I give this 4 stars. These Leanne Moriarty books do get a little bit like convenient, and they're just a fun time thriller, you know, but I really had a good time reading this. And then I read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this book is so good. You probably know what this is about. This is so super popular. This is a fantasy, very heavy on the romance aspect, but we're following Poppy. And in this world, this society, the royalty are basically these immortal beings, and they have a lot of like godlike influences in their society. And Poppy is a regular girl. She's not immortal yet. Certain people in this society make the ascension, is what it's called, to become immortal, and Poppy is the maiden in this society. So she is this figure for the royalty basically, and we're not really sure what role she plays. Poppy isn't even sure what role she plays, but she knows that she is planned to be ascended to immortality within the next year. But she's not allowed to show her face. She's not allowed to really go out in public. She's not allowed to talk to people in public. She just has a lot of rules and regulations in her life. And she's not the biggest fan of that, but she's played her part because she feels like she owes some of the royalty in this society, because they like took her in, her parents were murdered, as a lot of our fantasy characters stories go. And this society is really interesting too, because the like baddies in this first book are like vampires, zombies. They're like vampire zombies. And it's like this mist comes, and then all these vampire zombies just like run out and attack. Then if you get bit, you're infected. It's just a lot, and it's a lot of fun. But let me talk about our love interest. His name is Hawk, and he is a guard. He becomes Poppy's royal guard, basically. Okay, that's not a spoiler. And then they have a immediate attraction to each other. They actually met, but they kind of didn't know who each other was, and they had a moment in the very first scene of the book, and then he becomes her guard, and then it just spirals from there. And we just find out a lot of secrets about this world. We go on a little bit of a journey toward the end of this book, and we just learn new things. And I can't wait to read more. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it so much. And I can't wait to read the second book. And then I read Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins, and I really did not like this book. This is a thriller, and it has a beautiful cover. And that's about all the positive things I can say about this. So the setup of this is we're following this girl. She has just recently moved to Hawaii with her boyfriend, and they are just kind of living transiently, basically. She's been working in a hotel cleaning rooms, but then she gets fired, and they're just like living on someone's couch, basically. But they have a boat, and if they get the boat working, they could sail and live on the boat. Well, these 2 random girls, like college girls, show up in Hawaii, and they're like, hey, we will pay you, talking to her boyfriend who has the boat, we'll pay you lots of money if you take us to this island. And he's like, great, I'll get our boat repaired and we'll all go to this island, and it will start a new story for us. So they do, and when they get there, someone else is already on this very remote island, and this island has like a dark history, like some people were murdered on it, and maybe they think there's treasure there or something. Maybe that sounds interesting to you, but I don't know, just the way this book was written, I was never like fully into the story. I was just kind of annoyed by everyone. Like, no one in this book makes good choices, and everyone is really selfish, and I never really understood why our main character, Lux, is her name, and Nick is her boyfriend. I can remember that because that's my husband's name. But I never understood why they were together. I was like, do you all even like each other? Like, this is just a really tension-filled relationship, and it sounds like you don't trust each other, and you get jealous over the smallest interactions that your significant other has with anyone. So they were just annoying. The girls they took on their boat were like bland and annoying. And then the people there, I didn't like the things that happened in this book. And then the ending of it was just so ridiculous. It was just pointless. Like, I felt like this book was just pointless. I didn't feel like the story was worth being written. And I gave it 1 star. So sorry about that, but I love this cover, and it's why I read the book, but I did not like it. And then since I didn't like that Rachel Hawkins book, I picked up the other Rachel Hawkins thriller. This is The Wife Upstairs, and I liked this one a lot more. I ended up giving this one like 4 stars on Goodreads, 3.5, because I did like it. I listened to the audiobook, and I think I like this so much because I've read Jane Eyre. This is like a thriller modern retelling of Jane Eyre, and I felt a kinship with Jane Eyre when I read it. So I really enjoyed those aspects in this book. Like, there were some like lines, like iconic Jane Eyre lines, like the "reader, I married him" line that got used in here. I really enjoyed that. So this thriller is set in Georgia or Alabama. It's set in a southern state, and I will say the audiobook for this, the accents, our main character is not from the South, so the other people in this that the narrator voiced had the thickest and fakest southern accents, which was annoying, but that's not the story. But our main character, Jane, is a dog walker for rich people. And she kind of has a secret that she is keeping from us for why she is going by a different name in a different town. But she strikes up a relationship with not one of her customers, but just a guy who lives in this town. It's Eddie Rochester. And he's a young, attractive man, and everyone thinks that his wife went missing and was probably murdered. Well, you can tell by the title. And if you are familiar with Jane Eyre, she's upstairs in his house. And you find out why she is, and you find out more about Jane, our current wife, her past. And they come to a head. They're not really related. The stories are not really related to each other, but I did have a good time learning about the stories. I really liked the wife upstairs as a character. B, her name was B. Bertha. Her name was Bertha. She goes by B. And she was like a really successful businesswoman, and we find out what her past is like and what happened with her and why she's locked upstairs. So if that sounds interesting, I think you might like this. I had a good time listening to it, except for those accents. And then I read The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Jensen. This is the fantaseries. It's a book club hosted by some of my friends here. I'll link it below. And their pick right now was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Jensen. So I read it, and it was so good. I gave the first book 4 stars. Like, it was a great fantasy time. And this world, these kingdoms, are at war a lot. They like trade and work with each other, but they're also at war. So Miradrina, the kingdom that our heroine is from, the king has a harem and he has lots of daughters, and 20 of those daughters he sent out into the desert to train as assassins because they have a treaty with the Bridge Kingdom, Ithaca. And one of the daughters from this kingdom is going to marry the king of the Bridge Kingdom. So the king has been training some of his daughters to be assassins and spies so that when they marry the king, they can basically help them invade the Bridge Kingdom. So Laura is our daughter that gets chosen to become the queen of Ithaca and marry the king. So these girls have been raised apart from their kingdom. They don't really know what's going on in here other than what they have been told. So they think that this Bridge Kingdom are the enemies. So they get married, they have an enemies relationship. They're just kind of like coexisting around each other because they don't trust each other, but they have an attraction for each other. And this Bridge Kingdom of Ithaca is very jungly, and there are a lot of like really aggressive, like almost comically aggressive snakes that like jump at people, and sharks that are like trained to eat anything that's in the water. It's wild, but I had a great time because it's just so different from your like typical fantasy. But anyway, Laura comes in. She's planning to be a spy. She does some spy things against them, but then she learns that maybe this Bridge Kingdom is not the kingdom that's in the wrong, and that maybe her dad is a horrible person. And then we have her and King Oren's steamy relationship together, and it was just a really fun, great time. And I read the second book, The Traitor Queen, which I gave 5 stars. I liked it even more. You know how these fantasy romances go. So like, we have enemies, then they're lovers, then maybe they get their feelings hurt and they're enemies again. Well, in the second book, Laura and King Oren are basically apart most of the time because of something that happened in the first book. And then it is Laura working to get back into the good graces of the Bridge Kingdom, or just make things right. She just wants to set things right. She knows a lot more now, and she is working against her dad, and we just have a really great time. And what I loved so much about this second book is the king's harem has a lot of politicking going on inside of it, and that kingdom really keeps their women in a weak place. Like, these other kingdoms have women warriors and generals in their armies, and then the kingdom Laura's from is like, you're a wife and you're here to be pretty. But then that just makes these queens find power in different ways, and I really liked how those elements were developed in this book, and I'm already like halfway into the third book, and those just keep getting better. So I'm really enjoying this fantasy series. And then I read Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgashig Ross. This is a native Canadian written apocalypse book. So we're in Canada, in a very snowy part of Canada. And we're on this reservation and everyone's just living their normal lives. Some people are getting ready for winter and some people are not so much ready for winter. Then the power goes out and it doesn't come back on. So it is this community that is surviving this modern apocalypse in this very isolated, snowy setting. This book really looks at how different people respond differently and who sticks to their morals and who will really like go to martial law and just do what they want to do. And I had a really good time reading this book. I did read it physically, but I've gone ahead and passed it along to my brother and my dad to read. And this was a really good, quick read. I gave it a solid 4 stars. It was a good time. It was very unique. And I would recommend it, especially right now. We've had a lot of snow here in Kentucky recently and ice. So it was the perfect time to read this book. And then I read The Maid by Nita Prose. This is a new thriller release. And this was the most wholesome main character that I have read the perspective from. So she is a maid at this bougie hotel and she takes pride in it. She is very naive and she might have a little bit of like a social disorder, and she talks about how she has a lot of trouble reading people's expressions and like their tones of voice and how things really have to be like laid out plain for her. And she's just living her best life being a maid. She just finds a lot of fulfillment in cleaning people's rooms and letting people have a nice clean hotel stay. Well, she finds a body of one of their regular customers in a room, and she is maybe being a little manipulated by some of the people who played a role in it, and the story snowballs from there. Have I said that for every book I've talked about? But she has people who are kind of against her, people who are for her, people who want to be her friend, and people who think that she is just too weird to spend the time on. But I loved reading from her. It was so wholesome, and like she needs to be protected at all costs, and some people realize that. And then we get the story of like what had happened to cause this murder and what's been going on at this hotel. And it was a really fun read. The audiobook was really good. I gave it a solid 4 stars. It was a fun time. I would recommend it if you want just like it's a more lighthearted thriller for sure, but it was very fun. And then I read There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. And I don't know how I waited a month to read this because it came out on like December 1st and then I didn't read it until the middle of January. This is the second book in Sophie Lark's Sinners duet. The first one is There Are No Saints. This is a serial killer romance. You've heard me talk about it. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year. This continuation I thought was so good. We got some backstory on our characters. Mara, our starving artist, and Cole, our wealthy serial killer, and they are together in this book. I understand that some people don't really like that, like you want that to be the final piece of the book, but they are already together in this book. But I loved it, and they are just like helping each other get closure from their past, and I thought it was so good. Mara becomes just like a strong girl. And I almost immediately started rereading this when I finished it because I didn't get to listen to a lot of the songs when I was reading it this first time, and I really want to go back and reread it when I can listen to the songs that it tells me to listen to. Oh. And I also got the discreet covers, the limited edition covers of both the books in this series. First book, There Are No Saints. Second book, There Is No Devil. And they have the snake that's like the tattoo that they tattooed each other. Ugh, I just love this series, and I need to read all the books from Sophie Lark. And then I finally finished The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes, and I gave it 5 stars. It was so good, and it is like, I know Jojo Moyes is not from Kentucky, but it is like Kentucky literature. It's set in basically a town between Lexington, where I live now, and Eastern Kentucky, where I'm from. It's basically set in a town that's like outside the Red River Gorge, if you know where that is. It's set in like Beattyville, if you're familiar. Anyway, Our female main character from this is from England, and she meets the son of basically a wealthy mine. I don't know if he's a mine owner or just like manager of a coal mine in Kentucky. And she gets married to his son and comes back to live in Kentucky. She was kind of trying to escape her family who didn't really like understand her in England. And she comes to Kentucky. And I think when she had America in mind, she had more of like New York City in mind. And she comes to Appalachia, rural, impoverished, coal mine dependent Appalachia in the 1930s. So she has a culture shock. This book is a lot, oh, I could talk about this book for a long time. This book has a lot of topics of women and minorities in the early 1900s in America, just like people's rights and stuff like that. Well, this is about the Packhorse Library, and Alice, who is our lady from England, she gets involved in the Packhorse Library, so she's delivering books, and it just like strikes up a form of independence for these women who are part of this program and for the families that they teach to read and deliver books to. And that independence and knowledge is very dangerous for the people who are in power. And it's a lot of conversation with that. And then we have different female characters in here, and I cried. I finished it at work and I had to cry at work, and it was just a lot, you know? But this story is so good. If you're looking for just like a women's literary fiction time, it is your book. And then I read another Liane Moriarty. I read Apples Never Fall. I gave this one 3 stars. It was not my favorite from her. The story is set around this family who, they're big into tennis. So the dad was like a pretty well-known tennis coach. He's now like 70 years old. And his kids were all really good at tennis, but not good enough to like win Wimbledon, you know? Like they weren't on the big circuit. They were just really good. And their mom goes missing. And this is a story of basically how this family became dysfunctional, because each of these kids, there's 4 children, and they all have personal issues basically from how they were raised to like focus on tennis and tennis only, and they only got value from that as a family. And then they also, the mom and dad of this family had a mysterious house guest who came and stayed with them for like a few months the year before the mom went missing. So now it's like the police trying to figure out where the mom went, and people being suspicious of the husband, and the kids either trying to help with the case or like being really closed mouth about it. But I just didn't like the characters very much in this. And then the ending of this book, if you've read it, I would love to know your thoughts. It was the most convenient wrap up to a story that I have ever read, and just like really unrealistic. And I get that Liane Moriarty's books are very convenient in their plots, but this one was just like too much for me. And the last book that I read in January is A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem by Amanda Collins. This is a cute little mystery romance historical. We're following a woman. She's a widow, so she has more mobility in society. And she inherited from her husband a newspaper company. So she writes stories for this newspaper and publishes it. She has no interest in getting married again. She had like, it sounds like an abusive relationship. Maybe we'll find out more because this is going to be a series. But their town has this serial killer on the loose, and he's like murdering people based on the 10 Commandments. Like it has stuff tied to that. And she wants the right person to be caught, but she also wants people in their town to be more vigilant. So she's posting, look at me in my 21st century brain. She's writing and publishing these newspaper stories about it to make people more aware and to basically give more power to just the normal people. And then her love interest is the detective who is on the case, and he is also someone who just wants the right person caught. And he's having to work against people in Scotland Yard who just want like the social aspect of the serial killings wrapped up. So the police force isn't super concerned with the actual murders, but with the public perception of a serial killer. Does that make sense? So it's another woman fighting against the tyranny of men. And she gets herself too involved in it, and maybe she's in danger some. And then she has a sweet little relationship with the detective. This book was good. I'm gonna give it like 3 stars. It was good. I wasn't super like engrossed by it. It's more lighthearted. And in my historicals, what I want from them is basically them to be a dark romance. But I gave it 3 stars. It was a good, fun time. I'd recommend it if you're just looking for an 8-hour audiobook to pass the time. But those were the 16 books that I read in January. This video is over 40 minutes long before I edit it. So thanks for sticking around. If you made it this far, put a coffee emoji down below. I'm wearing this super cute coffee sweatshirt today. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.